New Anglia. Following the surprise election of Democratic Republican Thomas Jefferson in 1800, several New England Federalists refusing to accept the rule of what they perceived as a political radical, opted to instead secede from the Union as the United States of New Anglia, with its capital situated in the New England hub of Boston. Jefferson, a proponent of state sovereignty, decentralization, and seeing the Federalist social views as wholly incompatible with his vision of republicanism, met with Federalist leaders to discuss terms of separation, granting them control of New York and western Pennsylvania in exchange for Federalist-held North Carolina. The New Anglia Federalists, believing in noble rule, ultimately reorganized themselves into a constitutional monarchy, borrowing heavily from the proposals of Alexander Hamilton to invest greater authority into the presidential office and make it akin to the position of a monarch. The Visegrad Union. Exhausted with the heavily Western-dominated European Union, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, and the Czech Republic came together to establish a closer political union of their own which better accommodated their Central European values, economics, and cultures. Its member states would collaborate on financial, military, and political matters, working to ensure their mutual security, prosperity, and advancement toward a shared vision of the future. Neighboring Austria and the Ukraine are considered potential future additions to this new union. Saudi ISRAELIA. The 51st American state of Saudi ISRAELIA encompasses the entire Arabian Peninsula, reaching as far north as the Turkish border. It is the foremost exporter of American oil, weapons, and campaign funds. LAURENCIA. In the year 1473, a Portuguese exploratory vessel stumbled upon a cold and mysterious new landmass whose waters were rich in codfish. Word would return back to Europe, and in 1500, Portuguese explorer Lavrador would establish the first Portuguese colony in North America after surveying the coast of what would eventually become the state of Laurencia, a territory which extended from the island of Newfoundland to the westernmost watershed of the St. Lawrence River. Disputes with France over claims to the territory and tempting new colonial prospects in South America nearly led to the colony's extinction, but support from Allied England and the development of a lucrative fur market ultimately kept interest in Laurencia alive, allowing it to eventually develop into a major settler colony by the turn of the following century. The DMZ. Not trusting the Koreas to play nicely, but also not wanting them to reunite if ever they did, the Democratic Union of the Free Soviet National Socialist People's Republics of the Demilitarized Zone was established to permanently keep North and South Korea apart. It is currently at war with North and South Korea. Turkestan. 1916 was the beginning of what would eventually become a mass independence movement for the various Turkic and Islamic populations of the Russian Empire. Upon the outbreak of the Russian Civil War, these movements, originally fragmented on account of differing political views within their own ranks, would eventually unite into a single front resistant to both the Red and White armies, adopting a broadly pan-Turkic, anti-communist, and anti-Western position. This alienated the young country from virtually all of its neighbors, including the newly established Republic of Turkey, which was believed to be too westernized. Turkestan was, however, quite valuable as a buffer state between the USSR and Britain's Asian sphere of influence, motivating the two major powers to ultimately leave the new country to its own devices. Over the years, Turkestan would prove an opportunistic state, picking off desired lands from its neighbors during times of hardship, most notably China's territory of East Turkestan during the Sino-Japanese War. Cascadia. With the remnants of America left as a highly decentralized confederation, it was inevitable that other states would eventually break away. Cascadia was one of them. The lands of Cascadia follow the coastal North American West, from northern California to the high borders of British Columbia. With Laurencia, New Anglia, and the Confederate States having blocked off a direct settlement path for Britain via the East Coast, the British instead opted to establish a new colony on the West Coast. Aided by American settlers who braved the untamed inland of the continent to reach the opposite coast, this northwestern territory soon developed into a uniquely new Anglo-American culture with a deep pioneering spirit. EXILICONIA. Legend has it that long ago a mysterious race of creatures appeared in northern Germany. Exiled from their native lands, they were weary and desperate but misunderstood by the local Germans. This misunderstanding soon led to terrible conflict between the Germans and the otherworldly beasts, a conflict which would soon see the Germans driven out. The creatures, proving themselves to be technologically superior to humanity, built up high impenetrable walls so that they may finally live in peaceful seclusion. Greater Russia. In the early 1790s, Russia's Catherine the Great, with the support of Austria, worked to mutually partition Ottoman lands in Anatolia and the Balkans. The Austrians would gain Bosnia and parts of Serbia, while Russia gained Anatolian territories along the Black Sea. These latter acquisitions, however, were just the icing on the cake, as Russia set about establishing two new Orthodox states from these lands in the form of a Kingdom of Dacia and a new Byzantium, the latter of which would become the personal realm of Catherine's grandson, Grand Duke Constantine. With these loyal states, Russia became the foremost guiding force of Slavic Orthodox Europe, while the Austrians maintained control of several Catholic Slavic lands. The Republic of Hesperia. In the wake of the 1929 stock market crash, the city of San Francisco not only remained stable but thrived. Not a single San Francisco-based bank had failed, and the city saw massive wealth gains during and following the construction of the San Francisco-Oakland Bay and the Golden Gate Bridges. These good fortunes and continued stability for the city caused many people in San Francisco and across the wider Bay Area to become disillusioned with President FDR's New Deal, as his grand policies failed to produce effective measures for national recovery and seemingly held San Francisco back from achieving greater prosperity. This regional sentiment soon sparked a grassroots organization dubbed the 1906 Movement, named after the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. Eventually, the 9 counties situated on San Francisco Bay seceded from the Union and declared independence as the Republic of Hesperia in early 1939, with San Francisco as its capital. Tinigüe. Hoping to escape Spanish colonialism, the native tribes of Paraguay would migrate southwest and establish a new homeland there, only to be conquered soon after and incorporated into the Spanish Empire, though not seeing very much settlement or development by the Spanish. Tinigüe would eventually secede from the empire upon the outbreak of the Peninsular War in Europe, following in the footsteps of many other freedom-seeking Spanish colonies. In present day, Tinigüe is a third-world country with corrupt leaders who stall its internal development. The country has a minority German population which arrived in the wake of World War II, and although the Germanic population is a minority, they hold the majority of government positions. The Mongol state of Ka. In a world where Mongolia is fertile, the Mongols developed similarly to the Germans. Not needing to rely upon nomadic lifestyles, they established permanent settlements that grow into imposing tribal cities with a strong warrior culture. When the Han Dynasty collapsed, similar to the Romans, its lands came to be conquered by the Mongols. Although not all of these conquered lands would be retained by the Mongols over the centuries, the region eventually known as the State of Ka would be, named so after the Sinicized name of the Mongol tribe who settled it, as it would develop a hybridized Sino-Mongolian culture. The United Republics of Scandinavia, the Baltics, and Northern Germany. As the Hanseatic League grew ever stronger, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark saw it as increasingly necessary to put aside their differences to combat their shared rival. This would lead to the establishment of a more centralized Kalmar Union. A centuries-long period of economic and naval warfare ensues in which the Kalmars would be able to gradually chip away at Hanseatic territory, soon acquiring it in totality. The diverse nature of the new union and increasing liberalization in continental Europe soon leads the kingdom to reorganize itself into a union of republics, one whose navy and economy would make it one of the most powerful entities in all of Europe. The State of Greater Louisiana. In 1803, Thomas Jefferson's attempt to purchase Louisiana from Napoleon fails as they could not come to an agreed-upon price. But with Napoleon focused on conquering Europe and local concern that the United States might attempt to conquer Louisiana by force, the Louisiana Territory would declare independence toward the end of the Napoleonic Wars. Largely populated by Americans, French, and Amerindians, this state, whose population is almost entirely concentrated on the southern Louisiana coast, becomes a powerful trade hub through its controlling of the Mississippi River and access to vast farmlands, which it would gradually attempt to settle through the 1820s and 1830s. This independent Louisiana would now restrict American expansion and soon becomes the target of attempted conquest by the United States, who would rather see Louisiana stripped down to its coastal possessions or annexed entirely. The Kingdom of America. Following Washington's refusal to accept the presidency, Alexander Hamilton proposes at the Constitutional Convention that an American monarchy in the absence of a unifying figure like Washington is the sole means by which the states can be kept united, and said monarch must not hold any ties to Britain or France in order to prevent a conflict of interest. Ultimately, the position is offered to Prince Henry of Prussia, who accepts the position. The Kingdom of America would see to the annexation of the Louisiana Territory, a victorious Anglo-American War, and an early Spanish-American War, having taken on a far more imperialist and aggressive character without Washington's guidance. The American monarch, in European fashion, would seek to abolish slavery across the country swiftly, much to the ire of the South, which promptly succeeds to establish the Confederacy of Columbia. War does not immediately break out between the two, but a strong hostility does exist, and conflict between the two appears almost inevitable. The US of Z thanks you for watching. Special thanks to Anchor for animating the first half of this video, and to everyone who submitted an entry into this contest. Tune in this Wednesday to catch 7 Ages of America Part 3, and as always, support your legion by liking the video, or join our ranks by subscribing for more. Mr. Z, out.